Hello, everyone. I am Chris, and it's another Tuesday, which can mean only one thing. It's another James Bond review. And this is an exciting one because we're starting a new Bond era tonight. A very short lived era, granted, with Timothy Dalton. And of course, we're kicking off with his first of the double whammy of his films with The Living Daylights, which is the 1987 film directed once again by John Glenn. Wow, we're almost to it, ladies and gentlemen. Next week is License to Kill, which is my favorite Bond film. So I guess that's going to kind of spoil the review ahead of time. But I'm getting to see it on the big screen for the first time next week, which will be incredible. So do tune in next week. Let's finish. It feels so weird. We're starting the Timothy Dalton era this week, and next week we're finishing it. He only did 2 films, as I mentioned. So that's going to be License to Kill. That's going to be Tuesday, the 2nd of August. And that's once again going to be at 11:30 p.m. British Standard Time. Hopefully we get some people who jump on this one because I'm going to open the chat up to everyone else, of course, as well. Your Timothy Dalton celebrations. Are you a fan of his Bond? Which of the 2 films you prefer? Do you prefer this or License to Kill? I think there's an audience for both. And of course, not just for my James Bond stuff, I do some other stuff occasionally as well. Do please subscribe to the channel for more movie reviews, discussions, and live streams. There should be some big films coming out towards the end of this year and over the summer months indeed. But until then, I'm going to be talking about these Bond films. I think we've got 10 left, if I remember right. Yeah, so this is the 15th one we're talking about tonight. 10 more and it's all done. I literally can't believe we're at License to Kill next week. I remember when I started off back in April, week 1, and said, Dr. No, we've got to wait ages until we get to License to Kill, and it's next week. That's how quickly time flies. And do consider following me on Twitter as well. You can find me at Hobbit Fan Editor. I'll post all the times that I'll go live on there and some other stuff along the way too, and some updates and everything like that. So please do consider following me on there. And also, of course, because we're talking Living Daylights tonight, let me know what you think of Living Daylights. Positives and negatives. Maybe you love this film. Maybe you hate this film. Anything in between. And we're at a new Bond. So I'm going to open the question up again. Which is your favorite James Bond film, and who is your favorite actor to play Bond? We may as well jump in straight away. Timothy Dalton. So the actual casting process for this film was insane, and it's very involved, and I'm not going to go all the way through it, but suffice to say there were names chucked around like Sam Neill, and all different kinds of actors were touted for the role of Bond after Roger Moore. Including Pierce Brosnan, who of course would get the gig after Timothy Dalton. He was doing a show called Remington Steele at the end. I mean, this just shows you how backstabbing TV and film companies can be and how it's all politics and everything. So Remington Steele was wrapping up. I think it was due to get cancelled. And right around that time, I think they were auditioning him, or, the Broccolis were looking to bring on Pierce Brosnan as Bond. And because that caught wind with the public, that kind of generated some newfound publicity for Remington Steele. So the studio, trying to, mine what they can from this popularity, decided to exercise a clause in the contract and renewed Brosnan's contract to do more episodes of Remington Steele. Because of this, the Broccolis didn't want to use him if he was already Remington Steele in a show. They didn't want to sort of use him as Bond. They said, he's got to be doing nothing, and then he can be Bond, but we're not going to have 2 spy things happening concurrently at the same time. So obviously they went with Timothy Dalton, and then Remington Steele was cancelled 5 episodes into the new series. So, I mean, we could have had Brosnan a lot earlier, and maybe he could have been like the new Roger Moore and done a lot more films under his belt. Even Brosnan only did 4, which is, maybe it's because he was sort of like my generation's Bond growing up. Everyone was talking about, Pierce Brosnan. Die Another Day was massive when that came out, I remember. My close friends, especially who were Bond fans. I wasn't a Bond fan around that time. I was just kind of aware of its presence. And I remember everyone going to Die Another Day was the big one. I don't remember The World Is Not Enough. Can't remember what year that came out, but definitely Die Another Day. That was the big one. I remember all the posters for that and the trailers and everything. And then Casino Royale. So I guess my generation's Bond was Pierce Brosnan. But yeah, I mean, he could have had way more films. And I think he would have done more films as well. I think he would have been exactly like Roger Moore in the fact that he loved playing Bond, and he would have played Bond as, many opportunities as he got. But Timothy Dalton was kind of debating whether he wanted in, whether he wanted out, whether he wanted to do it in the first place. And then, he agreed to do it. I don't think Timothy Dalton would have been an actor to play Bond that would have stuck around for a long time anyway. So I always got the impression that maybe he would have done a trilogy, like 3 or 4 films tops, maybe a trilogy. And that's actually one of the saddest things in movie history, in my opinion, is that Timothy Dalton never got his 3rd film. 2's such a weird number, you know. George Lazenby is kind of unique. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a very unique film, even in the Bond franchise, I think. I think it was ahead of its time. I can imagine the director of that film. It's like the Back to the Future thing. Like, I guess you guys aren't ready for that, but your kids are going to love it. You know, it showed more of that tragic side of Bond, a very different feel to it, a more stripped back side to the Bond films, which of course we'd get with License to Kill, and especially when we get to the Daniel Craig films, for better or worse. Way ahead of its time. And, you know, so 1 film is unique, but 2, I don't know. 2 is just such a weird number. It is kind of like a little blip, unfortunately, which is a shame because Timothy Dalton, to me, is without a doubt one of the best actors to ever play Bond. And I'm going to back that up in just a second. Carl, I did see your comment, my friend. How are you doing? I'm doing good, mate. I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. Hope you are too, mate. Thank you for jumping on again tonight. Timothy motherfucking Dalton is hard as nails. Absolutely hard as nails as Bond. And, you know, if I was going to say who had the best performance as Bond, who played Bond the best, it's Timothy Dalton. It is. More so his performance in me for License to Kill, and that could be to do with the higher rating, because obviously it's rated 15 in the UK, so I guess it's rated R in the States. It's much more violent, it's much more hard-hitting. Sanchez, you know, the villain, it's like a drunk kingpin, and it feels a lot more realistic, I guess, in the sense it does still have some heightened moments in it, of course it does, but that feels like really, really hard as nails. And this one, like, Timothy Dalton plays the character. What I love about him is that he actually went back to Ian Fleming's books. He didn't want to do over. He didn't want to try and play Bond as Roger Moore would, or Connery, or whoever it happened to be. He wanted to make it his own. And, you know, because he's an absolute paragon of an actor, he was like, right, I'm going to go back. And he read, to my knowledge, he read every single Ian Fleming James Bond novel in order to prepare for the character and get in the headspace, which is fantastic attention to detail, and absolutely hats off to Timothy Dalton for doing that, because he didn't have to. He didn't have to, you know, he could just be handed the script and just be like, oh, play Bond. But he went the extra mile, and he read, and the fact that he read every single book as well, he could easily get in the mindset of the character. And you can see that as well. It feels like a much more realistic depiction of what you would imagine like a British secret agent would be. It looks like he's withholding a lot of pain. He's very disconnected. And it's items like this, you know, qualities of his character that would see definitely played up more in the Daniel Craig films, but you could argue that maybe they went a little bit too far in that regard and forgot to have some fun along the way. I think there's a level, though. I think it has to be tonally consistent, and there are a couple of elements of this film, and even in License to Kill as well, which is my favorite, that, you know, they throw a couple of one-liners in there for Timothy Dalton and a few little gags and jokes and stuff that never quite land with me, purely because Timothy Dalton isn't that Bond. He's not the wisecracking Bond. He's not the one-liner Bond. He's he's almost like a reluctant hero, I guess, kind of thing. It feels like the job's really wearing on him. You know, we see him chain smoking, he's drinking, he's, you know, hot and cold women constantly, which are all the ingredients of what we've come to expect from Bond. But the other times it's been done in a very sort of joking way, and a very tongue-in-cheek, almost like a carry-on kind of film in many ways. I've always seen it. You know, it's always been played for laughs. Excuse me. Whereas in this one, you get the impression that this job has really taken a psychological effect on this man. And, you know, he's living day to day. You know, anyone could be around any corner who wants to kill him at any point. So he's got to handle that. And he's got to handle, you know, really high pressure situations. And he's the man who can get it done. He's the man who's best for the job, but he is a man that is sort of like weathered by it, and the reluctant hero. And there's little nuances to his performance. I can talk for ages about Timothy Dalton as Bond, and I probably will. This is the place to do it. There's loads of little nuances in his performance that come through, and he reminds me of a man that looks like he's almost about to snap at any moment. You can't quite read him, which is fantastic. He's one of the most romantic Bonds, I will say that, but most of the time, he's doing it for an agenda. He's doing it to acquire something, or to gain information about something, or to set up a meeting with someone. He's always doing it for Queen and Country, which of course is what Bond does. But in those moments, those tender moments, especially in this film when he's with Cara and when he's with Pam Bouvier, especially in License to Kill, you really genuinely believe those connections and that he does genuinely love those women, which, it's a Bond thing. The next movie, he's going to have another Bond girl. It's never going to be the same one, unless you get to Daniel Craig, and we'll talk about that. Well, actually, no, that's saying that. There was one of the Sean Connery films, wasn't there, that did carry over one of the women from a previous one, so I guess I can't stay mad at that. Bits like where he's at the carnival in this film, at like the fun fair on the big wheel. And that moment, like, it's so romantic. It really, really is. It's just the ultimate. Timothy Dalton is the ultimate fucking man in this film. It's so good as Bond. And then especially at the end as well, when he says, like, I wouldn't miss this performance for the world, or whatever he said, or do you really think I'd miss this performance? And he's waiting for her in the dressing room. Beautiful ending. Like, those moments. And by God, when we get to that ending of License to Kill, which might be one of my favorite film endings of all time. It probably in my top 3 of favorite film endings. It's incredible. But then there's also moments where the bit where he's talking to Saunders at the start, and he's getting the sniper rifle ready, and he's talking to Saunders, and he's like leaning against the bed, and he's like putting this sniper rifle together and loading it up, and that's just a great image of Bond, isn't it? Like, he's in the field, he's on the job, he's getting it done, and that just felt. The first part of this film felt very realistic as like a secret agent thing. It's not over the top ridiculous. It's literally someone setting up a sniper rifle and getting it in place and getting the time right to pot shot someone as they walk out. And that felt very realistic to me. And he plays those moments fantastically well. He has the Timothy Dalton smile, doesn't he? It's almost like a cat smile. It's like Tim Curry's smile in Home Alone 2 when he does that Grinch smile. When he's driving, he goes, "Whatever I done must have scared the living daylights out of her." And I can't do the smile, but he does this smile. He does this thing. There's moments as well in this where you can tell that he really genuinely cares about his fellow men in the field as well. Especially, Jesus Christ, when we get to License to Kill next week, the whole film is a revenge story for Felix Leiter, and Felix's recently murdered bride in it. It's a great moment. And in this one as well, when Saunders dies, I really like Saunders as well. This has got some really good allies in this one, really good people helping out Bond. We'll get into like the rest of the cast of characters in a minute, but I think it's worth taking the extra time to talk about Timothy Dalton, because I mean it's a new Bond. It's a new Bond for this week, isn't it? When Necros sets that thing up on the door, the automatic door, which basically just cuts Saunders in half. It's really brutal. You don't see it, but like your imagination fills in all the blanks of what would have happened. And just Bond's reaction, and especially when he picks up that balloon with smeared spionum on it, and he just crushes it and pops it in his hands. When he meets Cara right afterwards, they've just done the whole big wheel thing. They've had like the most romantic time together. And then he's like brought back to reality in that moment. And, one of his best friends has died, one of his fellow men in the field. And it's like, right, we've got to, she says like, oh, when are we heading to, is it Tangier? Is that where they need to go to? She says, oh, can't we just stay here for longer? He's like, no, we're leaving immediately. Like, we're leaving first thing in the morning. And he's like, bang, he's like back to the job again. And he has that intensity, and it's like, I ain't gonna fuck with you, mate. Like, you're insane kind of thing. And he does seem that way. He does seem like a very unhinged man. There's other kind of more brutal moments as well towards, I say brutal, but just sides of Bond that we hadn't really seen before at this point. Even On Her Majesty's Secret Service was trying to go in a new direction and try to be much more character focused, I would say, and emotional, and actually, telling a story. Bond wasn't just going to be a caricature. he was going to be like an actual character, and there was actually some drama and stakes to it. And obviously it was like a tragic love story at the end, wasn't it? And there's moments in this that we haven't really seen with Bond, and even on Her Majesty's Secret Service didn't go to, probably because it couldn't at the time in the 80s, you know, that we can start getting away with more in films. But the bit where he's trying to interrogate John Rhys Davis, and John Rhys Davis hits it's Pushkin, isn't it? And he hits the button on his watch to send for backup to the room. Bond has to be like quick thinking, so he grabs Pushkin's wife and he like tears her clothes down so she's bare chested, and he puts her in front of the door for a distraction so that when the guy comes in, you know, he's just staring at tits, and then Bond can get in and, you know, like incapacitate the guy. You would never have seen that in any of the previous Bond films. There's been moments where Bond sort of, I guess, like the closest comparison, I guess, is the bits where you've had Connery or even some of the early Roger Moore films where he's like slapping the women around to try and get information out of them, and he's like, you know, almost breaking their arm or something. So we've seen sides of those Bonds, but then after that, when Roger Moore kind of found his footing with The Spy Who Loved Me, that's when we kind of discovered the Roger Moore that we have now. You know, he's the fun, jokey one, he's the family-friendly one, he's the romantic one, and he's the quippy one. He's not going to break a woman's arm by the time you get to like Moonraker or something like that, or, you know, like Octopussy or something like that. Whereas this one, I think Timothy Dalton Bond could do anything. Absolutely nothing is off the table. But it's cool because, as I say, like, it puts you in that real situation. You imagine what it would be like for a real, you know, SAS or Secret Service kind of person put in that situation where they have to think on their feet, no limits to get the job done. And yeah, it's just cool moments like that in there. That being said, there are moments in this film, as I mentioned at the beginning, where they do throw a couple of the Bond one-liners in there. There's some really wacky bits in this that Timothy Dalton doesn't feel like he meshes well with. The case in point, no pun intended, the bit where they're sliding down the snowy bank on a cello case. Now, some people can find that charming and go, well, that's part of Bond. You need some fun in there. And I do agree with that. It does need to be escapist for sure. And you've got to have some fun with it in some capacity. It can't all be just like a miserable, depressing slogfest. Wait till we get to like Spectre and things like that. That's going to be fun to talk about. It won't be fun to watch, but it'll be fun to talk about. So the bit where you've got like Timothy Dalton sliding on a cello case and they're getting shot at, that's something that I can see Roger Moore's Bond doing, but it feels awkward and it feels a little bit out of place when Timothy Dalton does it. Some people might disagree with me on that and love that scene, and it's a fun scene. It's a very fun scene. That follows right after the whole the V8, the new car that he has in this. It's so fucking cool. If I'm gonna have like a toss up of like my favorite vehicle in Bond, I'm torn between the Lotus and I'm torn between the V8. The V8's cooler to me because it's a black car, and I have a black car, and black's my favorite color, and it looks sleek and it looks badass and it looks cool. It's got all the gadgets. But then the Lotus can go underwater, and that's got the gadgets as well, and that's sleek as well. I don't know. Drop me in the comments, which car do you prefer? Do you prefer the white Lotus or do you prefer the black V8? I love both. They're both incredible. But yeah, it just looks so sleek and cool. It's an amazing car. Some of the gadgets on it are really out there as well, even for Timothy Dalton Bond. You've got like the laser that comes out on the side. It's a fun moment, though. It's a fun car chase. It is. And it just slices the top of the car off. The top of the car just kind of drops off as the wheels carry on. You've got that. What other gadgets are on there? He's got the twin missiles, hasn't he? When he blows the truck up to get through. That's a great fucking shot, by the way. There's some great like stunt and pyrotechnics in this film and explosions. Really, really cool stuff. You've got that. What else does he have? He has the little skis that come out the side of the car. He cuts the hole in the ice as well, which is a fun moment. And you got bits where he like drives the car into the wooden hut, and I'm just thinking this feels like it'd be out of a Roger Moore film. It would. And I think there's actually more bits like that in this film, probably because it's that transitionary film between the two. And you often get that with a lot of Bond films as well. The first two Roger Moore films, certainly, Live and Let Die and Man with a Golden Gun, feel very much like they're still writing Roger Moore in the same vein that they would for a Sean Connery. And those are still really good films, but Roger Moore doesn't find his footing, I would say, until The Spy Who Loved Me. And you always kind of get that with some of the Bond films, where it's very rare that they're like hot out of the gate in like a really, really good film. Or they like found their take on Bond, what they're going to bring to the table. And I kind of say that's the case with Timothy Dalton. There are some really great new elements to this, but there are some of those little carryovers from previous Bonds, which I don't think mesh well. But by License to Kill, personally, I think they've ironed most of all of those out. There's a couple that are still in there that I'm like, but for the most part, they ironed it out, and I think he really found his footing for License to Kill, which is a shame, because then it's like, right, brilliant, let's get on to the next one. Let's get our third one in. We've found it. We've found the formula now for Timothy Dalton, and I want to see more. And was it 6 years? Was it a 6-year hiatus with the Bond films between License to Kill and GoldenEye? And it's just, he had to move on, didn't he? It's such a shame. It's genuinely like a real shame with that. Okay, so that's enough gushing about Timothy Dalton as Bond. Let's move on to some other characters in this thing, because this has got a big cast. There's a load of characters in this one. Let's talk about our Bond girl. Let's go for Cara in this one. Now, this is actually my second time watching this film. I should have opened with that, actually. So last year, watched it for the first time on the small screen, and the first time I watched it, my initial opinions on this film, I was very mixed. I'd say probably mixed to negative the first time I saw it. I loved some of the action set pieces. I thought the third act action with the plane and everything was phenomenal. One of the best Bond third acts that I've ever seen. I really loved Timothy Dalton. The music was fantastic. But beyond that, that was kind of it. I was quite negative on everything else, including the Bond girl at the time. So Bond girl's Cara, played by Mariam Diabo. And I don't know why I was so negative on her. I think I just found her a little bit simpering. Just, she was just kind of innocent. She was kind of innocent, and Bond was there to look after her. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. As I say, like, having a sort of damsel in distress character isn't bad writing. It's traditional writing. That's fine. If you can make it work for the film, that can, a character like that can be absolutely fine. But I do like my Bond girls with like a little bit of gumption, a little bit of something behind them. And I don't really get that with her for most of this film, even still on a second viewing. But I completely forgot about moments like at the end of the film where she's the one that rides after Bond on the horse. She's like the first one out of the gate. And then, the rest of the Mujahideen are like, oh, women, and they go chasing after her. While I'm talking about the Mujahideen, it's interesting because I think Dalton pronounces it in this film in two different ways. I think the first time that you hear him say that word is Mujahideen or something like that. And I was like, what? And then Cara says, oh, yes, the Mujahideen, which is, as far as I know, that's the way that it's pronounced, is the Mujahideen. And then I think he says it a second time, Mujahideen. And then I don't know if the director or someone had a word with Timothy Dalton and was like, excuse me, Timothy, you've been saying it wrong. And then the third and final time he actually says it in the film properly is Mujahideen. Hey, Dave, how you doing, man? Really need another Dalton Bond. I think it could have been the ultimate interpretation. Yeah, I agree. I really do. And the thing is, like, the two films that we're presented with are absolutely brilliant. Like, you couldn't wish for a better Bond. He's amazing, but I just can't find it within myself to say that he's my favorite Bond purely because he only did two. It's my favorite performance of Bond, and I do genuinely think it is probably the best take on the character, but I just can't say it because two films isn't enough. Maybe with a trilogy, maybe with that trilogy, I don't know. A trilogy just seems like more of a neat number, doesn't it? It really does. And you could have said, oh, the Timothy Dalton trilogy. Could you imagine that? And then I probably would have had more of a rounded opinion on him and could equally stack him up to some of the other Bonds. But when you've got Connery, who did did Connery do five films, was it? I think Connery did 7 for Roger Moore, even 4 with Brosnan. I could have done with a 5th. I don't like in between numbers. Let's just say that. I don't like 2 for Dalton. He should have had 3, and 4's a weird number for Brosnan. I wish he'd have had 5. I don't know. I guess I don't like even numbers when it comes to my films, but yeah, I know what you're saying. It's a shame. And 6 years is such a long time to wait for a film as well. It's kind of how long we've had to wait though between Spectre and No Time to Die, wasn't it? It seemed like it was a good amount of years between those. I know COVID didn't help, and of course that was delayed as well, wasn't it? But even still, like the amount of time that spanned between Casino Royale all the way up until No Time to Die, you would have think that, you know, Daniel Craig would have done at least twice the amount of films that he actually did. He could have cranked way more Bond films out of it in that time. But, you know, back in the day, they were cranking Bond films out every 2 years. And now it's like, there's still no news. When's the next one coming out? When's the next one? Do they have a script? Do they have a Bond lined up? Apparently not. Apparently it's going to be a complete reinvention of the character, which I don't know. To me, that just seems like it's doomsday for the Bond character. You know, aside from killing him off at the end of No Time to Die. But yeah, so like going back to Kara, sorry. There are moments with the character where she does like shape up at the end, and she does come into her own a lot more and starts to fight. I would argue I don't know where she gets those skills from. It just seems like in a blink of an eye she's driving jeeps into like the back of open plains, and she's like knocking guys out like in a fisticuff fight. She can ride horses breakneck speed with like toting a machine gun and all of these kind of things. So it does feel like a sudden change for the character. But those are moments of the character where she shapes up at the end that I'd completely forgotten about. I thought she was just kind of this damsel in distress character all the way through, and I'd completely forgotten those moments where she does actually put up a bit of a fight at the end. So that's great. You know, there's development of the character there. I just don't know how she gets from A to B. It feels very much like a sudden change of character. Now, on the flip side, when you've got like Pam Bouvier in License to Kill, I think she's like a fellow agent, isn't she, if I remember rightly? So yeah, when she's like flying a chopper at the end and stuff, when she's in a bar fight and she's got a gun and she's shooting holes in the wall and she's knocking guys out, I'm like, yeah, she's an agent, makes sense. Whereas in this one, it just felt like a sudden change. But even then, there are some really dumb moments with Kara. And the thing is, like, she's so sweet. She is really, really sweet. And it's genuinely like a really nice relationship. And I could see Bond getting in a relationship with Kara. She's just like a genuinely lovely, innocent, like wifey material kind of woman in this film. But when he tells her to like fly the plane at the end, and there's a joke in here somewhere about female drivers, I know there is. But he's like, I'm going to go and defuse a bomb in the back. Just nonchalantly, oh yeah, I'm just going to go and defuse a bomb. And he says, right, hold on to this, pull back on it, keep it level and steady. I've got to go and take care of business. And she's like, right. You have the whole fight scene with Necros, which we'll get onto later, which is probably the best scene in the film for me. Diffuses the bomb, comes back, and she's like, oh, James. And, you know, they do the whole James Bond lovey-dovey thing. And then he's like, fucking hell. And he has to like pull back on the thing because she's driving the plane directly into the side of a mountain. How long do you have to approach a mountain for in a plane that you're driving before you realize, oh, actually, yeah, I'm pretty close to that mountain. I might drive into the side of that thing. You've got the controls, love. Just pull back. Just pull back, gain some altitude. You just circumnavigate the mountain. So that's really strange. I don't know why she was. Maybe she's like a hidden agent or something. Maybe that's the ultimate twist of the film, that she was actually trying to drive she's going to try and kill herself and Bond at the same time. I don't know. That would have been a twist. She's fine. She's fine in the movie. She's you know, cellist. The whole music angle is quite an interesting angle. Maybe it's just because, you know, I'm really into my music. But where you've got like you've got the string quartets in this film. You've got the full orchestras and everything. She's playing Stradivarius cello as well. And I don't know. That's kind of a cool angle that we haven't seen in Bond before. And yeah, she's just nice. She's just nice, which I realize isn't a great word. You know, if a woman was like, oh, describe me, and you say, oh, well, you're nice, it's probably take offense to that because it's such a base word, isn't it? But she's fine. I enjoyed her more this second time round, I think, than I did initially, but she's still not up there in terms of one of my favorite Bond girls, I don't think. Right. Let's talk about let's talk about the other woman in Bond's life real quick. Let's talk, because we got a new Miss Moneypenny in this one, played by Caroline Bliss. I don't actually remember if she's in License to Kill. Is this the only one that she's in? She must be in the next. I genuinely can't remember Miss Moneypenny in the next one. And if she is in the next one, she must have like a single sentence or not say anything at all. And of course, like Dalton, Caroline Bliss only did 2 Bond films, and you don't really get enough of her as Moneypenny to really cast a good judgment on her character, really, and what she's bringing new to the table. You know, we had so many films with Lois Maxwell. she will always be Moneypenny. There will never be another Moneypenny like Lois Maxwell. She was fantastic, just phenomenal chemistry with all of the actors who played Bond that she served. Yeah, Caroline Bliss. I just don't have anything. We know that Moneypenny is apparently a big Barry Manilow fan. She's got all of his records. We know that. That's the one piece of information that we glean from it. She kind of checks Dalton out at one point in there, but there's not enough. There's not. If we'd have had more films, and maybe if she'd appeared in License to Kill a little bit more, we would have, been able to cast more of a judgment on what she brings to the character. A little bit more of that interplay between Bond and her in a second film would have helped, I think, too. And then, God willing, if we'd have got that trilogy, if we'd have got the Timothy Dalton trilogy, then there's more to say on her. Which also kind of goes along with Felix Leiter, and I completely forgot that Felix was in this film. He's played by John Terry. For any Lost fans out there, and I know that we've got some in the chat right now, hopefully still watching. He played Christian Shepherd. He played Jack Shepherd's dad throughout Lost. Really good actor. Really, really good actor. It's weird that he plays Felix in this because he's in like 2 scenes, and the scenes feel kind of inconsequential. At least they were to me. And then we get a different Felix Leiter in the next one. Of course, we go for a much older Felix Leiter in the next one, and he appeared in one of the older Bond films, and I forget which one it is. Part of me wants to say Diamonds Are Forever, but I can't remember. And he's really, really great as Felix in License to Kill, and I love that there's that kind of history to the character, that he's one that we've seen before. That being said, we've had so many Felix Leiters. Christ almighty, I think we've probably had more than Bond actors at this point, haven't we? I think actors playing Felix. I'm not actually sure. That'd be fun to count how many we've had. So there's not really anything to say, and because we don't get, we don't get him in the next one. We don't get John Terry in the next one as Felix. I can't really cast much of a judgment on what he brings to the table as Felix. A lot of the Felixes were just one and dones, and until we get to the Craig era, at least. Okay, let's talk our villains, and honestly, this is my biggest negative with this film, and it still stands. That being said, I did enjoy watching this film a lot more tonight than the first time that I watched it. As I said, I was kind of middle of the road to negative on it last time. I was probably a little bit overly negative, but a lot of what I mentioned last year still stands, which is really surprising because, I've watched the film within a year and I still have the same opinion on it. There's a villain problem in this film, and it's just, I can't take any of them seriously. None of them are particularly memorable to me. None are intimidating. None are sort of non-match Timothy Dalton's level. Now, next week when we get Sanchez, who's probably one of the most realistic and terrifying Bond villains out of the whole franchise, because he's literally just a drug kingpin, and he's played fantastically well. Really, really intimidating and terrifying character in that film. And I'm fine with, on the flip side to that, he's a realistic Bond villain in License to Kill. I'm fine with, a campy over-the-top villain who's just, monologuing all the time. I'm fine with that as well. But I feel like it has to match the tone of not just the overall film itself, but also the Bond that they're going up against. And with Timothy Dalton being a much more realistic and stripped-back villain, it kind of goes to show why the villains in License to Kill work, and they don't in this one. I'd actually say the villains in this are probably among the weakest in the entire Bond franchise. Not necessarily anything against the actors themselves. I think they play it fine. It just seems like a really mismatched, oddball group of villains to have in this. One of your villains is Georgy Koskov. He's just kind of like this sniveling Soviet general who's kind of a double agent and then like a triple agent, and he's double crossing and everything like that. But he can't hold himself in a fight, and he's just kind of like this simpering little wretch kind of thing. You're not intimidated by him in the slightest. He has no kind of clout or anything like that. And there's a moment where they kind of toy with his death. There's a moment he's driving a Jeep, and then a plane drives straight into him oncoming, and the plane blows up and the Jeep blows up. And you're like, oh, okay, that character got his just desserts. He got blown up. But then they cut to him in the Jeep, and he's absolutely fine, and he's got a bit of soot on his face, and his hair's kind of messed up and smoking. I thought, you could have killed the character there. that's not, I was gonna say that's not very realistic, but a plane driving headlong into a car, plane's gonna win, and especially if the plane explodes as well. So I completely forgot that they kept him alive at the end of it. I thought that's where he bit the dust. Not so much a villain as an outlier. You've got Pushkin, played by John Rhys Davies, who's touted as a villain at the beginning, and you're led to believe that he is, and you kind of don't know whether you can trust him or not. John Rhys Davies himself, very tall guy, very large guy, very imposing. He's very tall when he's not playing a dwarf. It's great. I actually was kind of racking my brain before this film started, because I suddenly remembered that this was the one with John Rhys Davies in. And I was thinking, how many actors from the Lord of the Rings films have featured in a Bond film? And I've got it to 3. And I might be forgetting one, but we've got John. I mean, that's a pub quiz question right there, isn't it? If ever I saw one. I'd quite like to do another Bond quiz, actually. Quizzes were fun to do. I could do some of them, maybe, if people want to do them. But yeah, John Rhys Davies as Gimli. You've got Sean Bean in GoldenEye, who was Boromir. And of course, you've got Christopher Lee, who played Saruman, and obviously Scaramanga in Man with a Golden Gun. And I want to say that's it. I don't know. I'm going to have to wrap my brain to see if I can think of any more. I might have forgot an obvious one or something, but I think it's 3. Pretty sure it's 3. I actually really like John Rhys Davies in this. He's such a great actor, a very varied actor as well. He can be like an absolute gentle giant, like this warm, loud guy who's going to embrace you in a hug. But then he can also be really, really imposing and intimidating, like he is in this film. Love the moments where Bond comes into the room and he's interrogating it. Well, actually, he's there to kind of execute him, isn't he? He's got the silencer pistol trained on him. And then it leads into that scene that I mentioned earlier where he grabs Pushkin's wife and kind of strips her and chucks her in front of the door. And then they kit him out with the fake blood vest as well, which is a cool moment. And then he comes back at the end to kind of tie everything up, doesn't he? Was it send him to Russia in a diplomatic bag or whatever he says? Oh, he's so great. So I like John Rhys Davies, but he's not really a villain. He's an ally. He's definitely an ally in many ways. Let's see who, and then I guess we just have Brad Whitaker, don't we? Brad Whitaker's kind of our main villain in this film. And he's this American arms dealer, and he's basically just like a caricature. He's this self-styled general. He's decked out in military uniform. He's got his little museum that he likes to recreate battles with, like little tabletop figures like Warhammer or something that he's playing with. It's utterly ridiculous, and to me, he sticks out like a sore thumb in this film, and that's nothing against the actor. So he's played by Joe Don Baker. Now, Joe Don Baker does come back in a future Bond film, and for the life of me, I can't remember which one it is. I can't remember if it's GoldenEye or The World Is Not Enough, but I know he comes back in one, and he's really great in that. It's weird that they use the same actor twice in like a different role, and I know that's been done in the Bond films before with Maud Adams, for example, and some other people, but you have him play a villain, and then not 2 or 3 films later, you have him playing a good guy, playing an ally. It's a very, very strange choice, but he plays the ally really well. But Brad Whitaker's just a perplexing villain. He's just this absolute caricature of a US Army general. And he's not intimidating. He's kind of like this ridiculous man-child kind of thing. When you've got that moment at the end with Timothy Dalton squaring up against him in this gunfight in his little museum, I guess it kind of reminds me in a way of like something like Scaramanga, how you've got the two, it's this cat and mouse kind of thing, and you've got this like menagerie of weird mannequins and a museum of like random stuff and distractions and little, like sound effects and everything, and animatronics all set up to try and kill Bond and whatnot. But he's just ridiculous. I don't know how he matches the tone of the film, and he certainly doesn't match the sort of antagonist protagonist of Timothy Dalton. It's really strange, and that is still the biggest negative thing for me. And I'm not alone in this as well. I'm not alone in this. The best part of the screening tonight, other than just, it's Tuesday and I get to watch another Bond film on the big screen, I get to listen to Aha. We'll get onto the music in a second, because holy hell, the music's fantastic to this film. There was this group at the front, and there's this little kid. This dad had like brought his son to it, which is really great, if he's introducing his son to all these films for the first time. I mean, he won't be able to see License to Kill next week because it's a 15. It's the highest rated Bond film. And this little kid went the credits. I could overhear him at the front. This kid was having none of this film. This kid fucking hated The Living Daylights. And he was going in. Now, I can go in on films, but this little kid was just cracking me up. I was like, this is a kid after my own heart right now. Like, he truly believes in what he's saying right now. He fucking hated this film, and he's going to let the whole world know that he hates this film. Oh, what was he saying? Oh, I've got to try and remember what he was saying about it now. He was just like, I didn't know what was going on the whole time. And it's a very convoluted plot in this, definitely. It's a weird take at the end when it's like, oh, suddenly it becomes like a diamond heist type thing. And then, oh no, he's using the diamonds to buy opium, which is going to fund his money that he can sell in the States. And then he's going to use that money to something with arms that he's selling to the Russians. It's very convoluted. And the kid was just, I didn't know what was going on. And then the kid was tearing into actually one of my favorite villain in this film. And not only one of my favorite villain in this film, but one of my favorite henchmen in all the Bond films. It's the character of Necros, who's the blonde Russian muscle-bound henchman character, because, you know, Lord knows it, the Bond franchise doesn't have enough of them. But I forgot the motif that he's listening to the earphones, you know, and it's the same song, and the song was by the band called The Pretenders, I think. You've got some John Barry influence in there as well, with like this really swanky sax, you know, this kind of sleazy, sexy kind of sound to it. Where Has Everybody Gone, the song's called, which isn't on Spotify, which really annoys me, because that would be a great addition to my Bond theme collection on Spotify. But you can find it on YouTube. But I mean, I can't drive and play YouTube at the same time, can I? So it's just a shame that it's not on Spotify. Great song. Honestly, I could kind of see that as the main Bond theme to this. If Aha didn't do like a absolutely bang up job of the main theme, then I could see them doing it. And in fact, I actually think that the Pretenders were down to do the main theme of this. I know that they were touted to do the theme. They actually have 2 songs in the film. So the first one is Where Has Everybody Gone, which I'd completely forgotten serves as Necros's leitmotif very much. It always, you know, he's always listening to it on his earphones. I mean, someone needs to get that guy a mixtape. Has he just got that one track on a cassette tape or something? Like, Jesus Christ, the guy needs to listen to another song. And then Barry works that into the score, and it's such a wonderful score. It's a great, memorable song. Let's see what the other song was called. Sorry, who sung it? Yeah, it was Chrissie Hynde, wasn't it? Of the same band, The Pretenders. She did the song "If There Was a Man," which is the closing credits song, and also it's the love theme. And it's moments like that I'd completely forgotten that the actual songs of those worked itself into a leitmotif throughout all of the film. I'd forgotten that Necros basically has a theme. I'd forgotten that there was a love theme in this, which corresponds to If There Was a Man, which is always fantastic, because I love when they have like the main song and then an orchestral version that's worked into the film. It just makes it more memorable. It just gives the whole film more of a musical cohesion, I think, and cements it all together. And it's great when they do that. Sadly, we won't get that in GoldenEye, because the score to GoldenEye is absolute. Oh God, it's a dumpster fire. It's an absolute atrocious soundtrack, and it's a shame because it's a really good Bond theme, you know, with Tina Turner. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's 2 weeks away. But yeah, this kid was having none of it. This guy was just trashing Necros, and he was saying like, and the villain is just this guy that walks around listening to headphones all the time. Like, good, let the hate flow through you. You know what? I agree with him on the villains. I agree that it's a bit convoluted, but I don't agree with him on Necros. Necros is incredible. The way he kills Sanders is absolutely brutal. The exploding milk bottles is amazing. It's very cheesy, but it's cool. And let's talk that third action set piece. The whole bit on the plane is, Jesus, without a doubt, probably, actually, you know what? Maybe a bit of a hyperbole. Probably one of the best sort of third act action scenes I've ever seen put to film. Genuinely. The stunt work is flawless. And I think probably between this and Octopussy, they were the 2 films that I was looking forward to seeing on the big screen the most in terms of their third act action set piece. Both involving aeroplanes and death-defying stunts. and probably the best comparison in just approaches to filmmaking and why practical effects will always trump CGI, in my opinion. Especially when it comes to action films like this, especially if you can do it with a stunt team, then do it, because it holds up, it stands the test of time. The bit where Necros and Bond are fighting and the back of the plane opens up and they both fall out of it, grabbing onto that netting that's sort of dangling from the back of the plane, in this netting that's got, containing all the opium and everything, and they're climbing up it and they're punching each other and they're kicking each other and parcels are flying out of this thing, and it's all in camera, and they actually did it, and they actually got some, Jesus Christ, some of the bravest stuntmen I've ever seen clinging onto this net, dangling from the back of this plane, and they actually filmed that, and it's amazing. Again, in the cinema, I was making sounds, and if I'm making sounds at a film, it's doing a good job. If an action film can get that sense of, breathlessness in you, like when it pulled back to that wide shot, and I was just sort of like taking in the set piece and the stunt work and everything, I just kind of went like, like it's just like, it's I don't know why I do it. I really don't. It's like a little inhale that I do, like I just can't believe, like I'm in awe, and it does happen in some films. If there's like a great set piece and it pulls back and they actually do it, one of the ones that gets me every time in Dark Knight, of course, is the truck flip. Amazing. I live for action scenes like that. And then the comparison, is the Uncharted film that came out with Tom Holland. And, there's a set piece like that in the video game itself, and the film looks like a goddamn video game. It's, the back of the plane opens up and a netting and stuff's flying out of it, and it's all digital bullshit, and it looks terrible, and you can tell that Tom Holland isn't in person, and it just doesn't have any weight. It's just filler. Whenever I see an action scene like that now in CGI, provided it's a film that, if a film's stylized in CGI, something like 300, I can forgive it, because they're using CGI as a artistic form, that they're putting some kind of visual style to it. And I know there are some things in action films, some things regarding like superhero things where you do need, of course you need CGI, and that's fine. But with things like this, where, you could easily film it, actually probably not easy, it's probably actually very difficult to film something like this, but the point is you can film it in camera. Case in point, this film did it in 87. And then you've got a film that's coming out in like 2022. It just feels so lazy. It's just like, oh yeah, we'll get Tom Holland on a green screen and we'll throw green boxes at him and we'll put a fan on him and then we'll just sort it all out in post. It just looks terrible, and it's not going to hold up as well. It just, as I say, it doesn't have any weight. It doesn't pack the punch when it comes to the action scenes, and that's the whole point of an action adventure film, isn't it? You need to be swept up for the ride and be part of that adventure, and if you can get it on camera, it just looks incredible. So I love the third act of this film. It's up there as one of the best in all the Bond films, in my opinion. And Necros is cool. I think Necros is cool. So I don't agree with the kid. I don't agree with him. Let's see. Any other characters to talk about? I think I've pretty much talked about it. I like Saunders. I mentioned the ally. It really sucks. If you're an ally in Bond, you're screwed. You're dead. It's basically like the red shirt equivalent in Star Trek, isn't it? But it's a shame because Saunders is really cool in this one. So I like it. Q gets some fun moments in it as well. The ghetto blaster and everything. Yeah, so I guess that covers all of the characters. The music I've kind of touched on, but I'll go a little bit more in depth into it. So I like the credit song. This is the first Bond film actually to use a different song in the end credits. Obviously, your main theme is The Living Daylights by a-ha, written by a-ha and John Barry collaboratively. Apparently, they didn't collaborate very well, though, which is very, very interesting. So, to my understanding, Barry was adding those Bond flares to the song. It's the strings, it's probably like the punctuated brass coming through in it, which works phenomenally well. And I love that blend of the two. You've got like the electronic style, and indeed Barry's score is kind of like that. It uses sort of electronic overdub tracks, and then he has the orchestra over the top of it as well, which, if I remember what I read earlier, was actually kind of a very revolutionary thing with music, at least film scoring at that kind of time. So love the main theme, but a-ha didn't. And apparently they produced a version which is their favorite version, the version that they favor out of the two. You can actually find their version I guess with their artistic intention on it, on the 88 album Stay on These Roads. I've listened to both versions. It's basically the same song, but I do prefer the Barry one. When you extract the strings and the brass, just doesn't hit the same. It feels a little bit weak. So personally, I'd go with the film version, but there is an alternate version out there that you can check out if you haven't done so, and it's probably worth checking out if you like the music of this film. I've already mentioned the Chrissie Hynde and the Pretenders 2 songs, Where Has Everybody Gone and If There Was a Man. If There Was a Man, absolutely beautiful theme. I'd completely forgotten that it was the love theme throughout the film as well, so it's nice that that song continues into the credits as well. I like that they have a different song in the credits. I wish it's a trend that would kind of continue, to be honest. Christ, especially next week when we get that. We've got the double whammy of Gladys Knight in the intro and Patti LaBelle in the outro. And then, unfortunately, you get the experience of love when you get to GoldenEye. But we'll get to that. We'll get to the music of GoldenEye. That's going to be a very interesting section to talk about come that week. I mean, you know, the studio tends to do this as well with the people that it picks to do the songs. Aha was chosen because of Duran Duran's success with A View to a Kill. It was the 80s. What's a popular 80s band at the time? Let's go with them. I actually think that Chrissie Hynde and the Pretenders could have done a fantastic Bond song. In many ways, actually, I think that Where Has Everybody Gone, because you've got that Barry brass in there as well, that very kind of sleazy feel to it, that could have served actually very well as the main Bond theme for this film. I genuinely believe that, but Aha is just, you know, if which is my favorite Bond song of all time is Gladys Knight, License to Kill. Just absolutely flawless song. Close second would be A View to a Kill. And chances are, if I'm listening to A View to a Kill, I'm going to be listening to this song, Living Daylights, right afterwards. It's always like it's a double bill for me. It's a double deal. If I'm listening to Living Daylights, I'm going to listen to A View to a Kill and vice versa. The two are interlocked in 80s harmony forever, and it's brilliant. 80s Bond harmony. I love some 80s Bond. It's the best kind of Bond. Oh, God. Other scenes that I can talk about that I really like. I really like the intro. I think it's a very good introduction to Timothy Dalton as Bond. My favorite introductions of a new Bond are always ones that tease his reveal. Best example of that probably is Timothy Dalton. Not Timothy Dalton, sorry. George Lazenby on Her Majesty's Secret Service. They really delay the reveal of his Bond. You know, when he's driving the car, it'll just be like a close-up of his hand on the wheel, like maybe just a close-up of like his hat or like the top of his eyes or something as he's looking in the rear view mirror, the cigarette and everything. It's a wonderful reveal to his Bond. And I think that works when you've got a new actor, you need to kind of break them in gently. I think the one Bond that doesn't get a proper mysterious intro in any way is probably Daniel Craig. I think Daniel Craig. It's kind of a mysterious espionage scene, but I think they do pretty much come out with it right away, don't they, with revealing him. And I remember Roger Moore's intro is pretty understated as well, but I think every other Bond that we've had does get some kind of delayed reveal. Connery, I know, gets one at the table, doesn't he? Then you get that wonderful reveal when he's like, Bond, James Bond. Lazenby gets one, Timothy Dalton gets one, and Brosnan gets a fantastic one as well with that bungee jump sequence as well off the top of the dam, which that's on my bucket list. I would love to do that bungee jump at some point. So, hey, if we've got anyone watching who's a Bond fan, who fancies doing some bungee jumping, let's get a group of us together. Let's do it, because I want to do it. I think it'd be really, really fun to do. I say that now, but I'm not standing up hundreds and hundreds of feet on top of a goddamn dam. A goddamn dam. That was a poor choice of phrase, wasn't it? Yeah, but the opening scene with Timothy Dalton, great. I like that it's kind of a training exercise that goes wrong. And the fantastic hero shot of Dalton. He's scaling the rock, isn't he? And then it's like the turn to the camera. I think I posted it on Twitter earlier when I advertised my stream. And the slow camera pan in. And it's like, that's a man's man right there. There's my Bond, Timothy Dalton. Other moments. I think I've mentioned all of them. Oh, what's the name of the guy who's like leading the Mujahideen? What's his name? British actor. Oh God, what's his name? Oh, I can't believe I'm forgetting this. The guy who helps them. Ah, damn it, I can't find his name. But the guy who's there we go. Art Malik is the name of the actor, playing the character of Kamran Shah. Yeah, leader of the Afghan Mujahideen. Love his character. I really, really like his character. I like that he's this guy in a jail cell at the beginning, and then that whole jail sequence is brilliant as well, with the whole whistling. It's the wolf whistle, isn't it? The wolf whistle lets out the deadly nerve gas, and then Rule Britannia lets off this like bomb or something, I think, doesn't it? And then they let him out, and then they get ingratiated into the Mujahideen, and then I like that they're kind of both leading the charge at the end. They're both in it for kind of their own ideals, but they work together in an unlikely alliance. So I really like that. And actually, that reminds me, isn't that in Rambo 3, I think? Is that just like an 80s thing? I think Rambo 3 deals with... Wow, a year later. Yeah, 1988 was Rambo 3, and I swear that deals with the Mujahideen, doesn't it, I think? I think that's set in Afghan. Yeah, that's must have been a thing. I mean, I don't really know history, to be honest. That must have been a thing in the 80s, I guess, if that was like, a popular thing that was going down. If there was trouble in Afghan, it seems like something that's always existed, to be honest, in my entire lifetime, really. I think that'll do it then. I don't know if I can really say anything else about Living Daylights. I mean, coming up to an hour, that's usually the time I try and go for on these things. But I guess if I give my final thoughts, seeing this on the big screen was fantastic. It really is a big screen experience, just for that third act especially. And I definitely did appreciate this film a lot more. There's some really fun allies in this as well. I forgot to mention the woman at the start with the whole pipeline thing, and she distracts the guy by... showing a bit of cleavage and just like pushing this guy's head into her bosom. And then she says, like, what kind of girl do you think I am? When she's distracted him long enough for Bond to get the guy out. Kara's a really nice character. Really, for me, the standouts in this are the action scenes and the cinematography, the music. I need to mention, actually, this was not John Barry's last score that he ever did, but it is his last James Bond score, and in my opinion, goes off on an absolute high note. The soundtrack to this film is phenomenal, and I keep saying that I've never actually listened to a Bond soundtrack on its own. Like, I've never just listened to the score on its own in my own time. It's always been from watching the film, and I really need to change that, especially with this one. There are so many great leitmotifs. You've got the love theme, you've got the James Bond theme, of course, the Necros theme, and then the orchestral version of Living Daylights, when that kicks in on that runway at the end. And it's lethal to drive to as well. I always find that my speed always creeps up when I'm listening to it. So I like those elements. Timothy Dalton as Bond, absolutely fantastic. I don't think he really comes into his own, though, until License to Kill, but he's still solid in this one, and shows us a different side of Bond that we haven't had before. Negatives... I like Kara, but I don't think she's one of the strongest Bond girls there is. I do find the plot is a little bit meandering at some points and a little bit overly convoluted for what it needs to be. But my biggest negative, which I still hold from last year, the villains are probably among the weakest of any Bond film. And it's such a shame. I think if you'd have gone for someone a little bit more realistic, a little bit more hard-hitting, I don't think a really overly campy villain would have worked for Timothy Dalton, in all honesty. So if they'd have gone with someone who's... I mean, you could have gone with like an army... If you wanted to keep it as an army general, keep it as an army general, but just have them be like this really, really ruthless guy, not this completely, idiotic man-child caricature of like a US army general that's got mannequins of loads of history's great dictators, because it's just dumb. And then like the other guys, like the Weasley little sidekick characters, they're just, they're not intimidating. And it's a shame. It would have been nice to have got a villain for this one that could match Timothy Dalton's intensity, which we get next week. So I guess that'll do it for my review on The Living Daylights. I just want to say a big thank you, of course, to everyone who's commented and tuned in and put up with me for an hour. I always appreciate you guys jumping on. I really do. Next week, guys, it's the one. It's the one and only. In all honesty, we could end the 60 years of Bond retrospective, whatever you want to call it, review series. We could end it after next week. License to Kill honestly doesn't get better than that, but we've got GoldenEye as well, which is now sold out. GoldenEye is a sold out screening at my show. I wanted to try and move my seat because I'm really far off to the side. Can't move it. Sold out screening, but that's in 2 weeks time. Next week, License to Kill, 1989. It's not only a farewell to my favorite Bond, It's farewell to, I guess, my favorite Bond film. But it's also a farewell to the 80s. It really is an end of an era next week. So License to Kill, it's my favorite. I'm going to see if I can try and get someone on for it, because I'd like someone to share in the love for License to Kill. It'd be great to have a conversation. So I'm going to ask around. If not, hopefully my passion for that film will carry us through. I'm probably going to go over an hour next week for sure. That's going to be 11:30 British Standard Time, 2nd of August. Get in here, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and yeah, it'll be a fantastic review, hopefully. In the meantime, do subscribe to the channel for more movie reviews, discussions, and live streams. I can't vouch for what the next video is going to be. It could be License to Kill a week today. Something else could come out, a trailer for something that I want to talk about, or a big film could come out. I don't know. Speaking of trailers, I actually got the trailer. This is the first time I've watched the trailer for Christopher Nolan's new film, Oppenheimer, coming out next year. As soon as it came up with a SynCopy logo at the beginning, I just kind of went like, like I made a noise that I've never made before. I was like, oh my God, it's Christopher Nolan's new film. And it's the teaser trailer for it. But you got me at Christopher Nolan. You got me at SynCopy. You know, it's a Christopher Nolan movie. I'm going to go and see it. Yeah, so please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And do consider following me on Twitter. You can find me at Hobbit Fan Editor. I post some random shit, and I also post when I'm going live, which is always handy to know. Another handy way to know, click the bell icon. I think it's still a thing on YouTube, isn't it? It's probably a little bit more reliable than just hitting sub. And in the meantime, let me know what you think of The Living Daylights if you haven't done so already. If you're just discovering this review right now, share in your Living Daylights hype or hate or anything in between. Open to all. That will do it for me then, guys. I hope you're all having a wonderful Wednesday night. Well, actually, into Wednesday morning now, aren't we? Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. It's weird how time works. I'm rambling. I'm clearly very tired, so I'm going to go and get myself to sleep. Stay excellent, everyone. Have fun, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Take care, everyone.